Hey, folks, happy Thursday. Welcome to Advisory. Today, we are continuing our conversation about healthy relationships. And I mentioned during yesterday's video that there is something that you have to set in a healthy relationship called boundaries. And once again, this can apply to multiple different areas of life with multiple different relationships, not just dating relationships. So, to start, let's see what you had to say about boundaries. What does it look like to set healthy boundaries?
Know what you want and making sure the other person respects that.
Ooh,
I don't know the answer to that one.
it's tough, right?
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean, or what do you think it means to set boundaries with people?
Something I think that, but like having at a distance that you think is good enough for you.
Ooh, a distance between you that's good enough for you. Very
Yeah.
good. What does it look like to set healthy boundaries?
That's tough.
That is tough.
I really think that a communication plays a huge role, and both knowing that you have clear boundaries, and so if you don't know the boundaries, then you can't do anything. But if you know the boundaries, then you be careful not to cross them, and then when someone does crossing them, talk about what it was like and how it made you feel.
Perfect.
To me, a good boundary is something that helps the other person in some way. Like for me, any of my students know that if I don't get enough sleep, I am grouchy. So I have a bedtime at 9 p.m. and my fiance knows that after 8:45, don't talk to me because I need to start getting ready to decompress and get what I need.
Awesome.
What it means to set healthy boundaries with people is to have a distance between two people to where they both are benefited.
Have good open lines of communication so that you can talk about what are the boundaries and what are we going to hold ourselves to.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thanks. Thank you once again to everybody for answering my questions. I will definitely be asking you more things, so be on the lookout for me if I've got my little microphone or my phone set up, whatever it is. There are lots of definitions about boundaries, and there's lots of different types, and I want to talk about all of them. For starters, I want to give you this definition, which I thought was very meaningful. A boundary is an imaginary line that separates me from you. It separates your physical space, your feelings, needs, and responsibilities from others. Your boundaries also tell other people how they can treat you, what's acceptable and what is not. Without boundaries, people may take advantage of you because you haven't set limits about how you expect to be treated. When you think about what a boundary line is in real life, right? That's a property line, or you cross over the Red River and you go from being in Texas to being in Oklahoma. In a lot of sports, you have out of bounds, meaning that you've gone outside of the boundaries that are set on the lines on the field. Personal boundaries are not that much different. They're called a boundary because it is something that you set for yourself that nobody in the relationships that you're in should cross. There are multiple different types of boundaries. Boundaries can be set in any areas of your life, including emotional boundaries, who you allow to be close to you emotionally. Physical boundaries. This includes your personal space as well as how comfortable you are with physicality in a relationship. Boundaries can be digital, who you allow into your followers list or who you let have certain information. Boundaries can be professional. This could mean that you only interact professionally with certain people that you have at work, or maybe a professional boundary can be what you're willing to do for the job. For instance, if someone has to clock out early and they keep on asking you to cover their shift, eventually you might have to draw a boundary that says, I can't cover your shift this week. Financial boundaries can be very important, especially if you have people that depend on you for certain money things. If you're always having to let someone borrow money, or your partner expects you to buy all sorts of things for them all the time, then you may need to draw a financial boundary. Here are some examples in boundaries, particularly in dating relationships, but again, this can apply to multiple different relationships. I'm cool with following each other on social media, but not with sharing passwords. I'm comfortable kissing and holding hands, but not in public. An example of a digital boundary would be I'm okay with regular texting, but I don't want to text multiple times in an hour. That's just too much pressure. An emotional boundary could be like, I want to spend time with my friends or family on weekends instead of constantly having to be with your partner. And maybe it doesn't have to be that you need to hang out with other people. Maybe you just need time to yourself. Sometimes we need to just shut everyone out and just have moments to ourselves, and that is perfectly acceptable. And of course, the big physical one is I'm comfortable with some touching, but I'm not ready to have sex. That's an example of a boundary. Okay, so hopefully you have a pretty good idea about what boundaries means and how you may be able to set some of your own boundaries, but you can only do that with clear communication. Like we said yesterday, communication is absolutely key to a successful relationship of any kind. Other people can't read your mind, and so they're not going to know what your personal boundaries are unless you communicate them. So you have to communicate your boundaries, and you can let the other person know what those boundaries are with something like this. I really like it when this happens. To tell them, hey, this is great, this is okay with me. I'm not comfortable when we fill in the blank. Or when this happens, or when you do this, I feel this way. You can use phrases like these to start a healthy conversation about what your boundaries are, and hopefully the other person will hear that. But you also need to know what the other person's boundaries are. Sometimes the people we are with may not be as forthcoming with what their boundaries are, and you still need to know them. And so if you're trying to find out what those boundaries are, you can ask things like, hey, is this okay? Or are you cool with blank? Whatever it might be. But simply asking the question and letting the other person know that you are a safe place to share those boundaries with can be huge. And this is very important. When someone tells you their boundaries, someone very clearly explains what they are, you have to respect them. If they change, if a person's boundaries change, which by the way, they can at any time, you need to respect the new boundaries. And when I say boundaries can change at any time, I mean it. Especially when it comes to physical interactions in a dating relationship, a no or a drawing of a boundary can happen at any time, and a respectable partner needs to listen to that no or listen to that boundary. It does take a lot of work to figure out what your own boundaries are, to communicate those boundaries to the people that you're in relationship with, and to listen to, understand, and follow the boundaries of someone else in the relationship. Boundaries can be very difficult, and you may not always do it perfectly, but just as long as when you cross a boundary or someone else crosses a boundary with you, as long as you have a conversation openly about, hey, this was a line that I didn't want you to cross, and that person realizes that they crossed that line, and you can both move forward, that's great. That's what boundaries are for. But here's the real deal when it comes to boundaries, and I really want you to hear this. If someone continually crosses your boundaries or reacts angrily to you setting those boundaries, they do not have your best interest at heart. Them crossing your boundaries or them reacting angrily to your boundaries is about them, not you. You should feel safe to set whatever boundaries you need, and if the other person can't get on board with that, it may be time to let them go. And this applies, again, to dating relationships. Maybe you need to let some friends go, or maybe at some point in your life, you even have to let some family members go. One more note about boundaries before I go. There is a difference between healthy and unhealthy boundaries. A healthy boundary should create peace both for you and your partner. It should get everybody on the same page, and it should set the expectations for the relationship. A personal boundary should never be used to control or try to control another person. Let me give you an example. A healthy boundary: I need space to hang out with my friends by myself without my partner around. That is a perfectly reasonable request and a very good boundary to draw if you need to. I need you to stop talking to other guys or girls because I might get jealous or you might cheat. That is not a boundary. That is an example of someone's insecurities getting the best of them, and it may be an indication that there is not either trust, honesty, or both happening in the relationship. Ultimately, your boundaries should be set by you, and they should be about you. People in healthy relationships don't try to control each other. And while jealousy or concern for cheating is a perfectly reasonable feeling to feel, acting out of that feeling by forcing someone to do something is not the way to go. All right, folks, that will do it for our lesson about boundaries. I hope that you learned a lot. I hope that you have a lot to think about when it comes to how you set your boundaries and how you respect other people's boundaries in the relationships that you have. Be good to yourself and others, and I'll see you real soon.